Take a deep breath with me, in and out. Now, imagine a night where the air itself trembles, a night when centuries of silence snap, and fire begins to speak louder than chains. That's where our story begins, with sparks, tiny, trembling lights that dare to defy an empire. You see, history likes to call them rebellions, but to the people who lived them, they were not just uprisings, they were awakenings, moments when the enslaved remembered who they truly were, human beings, not property. And when that memory returned, it burned brighter than any torch. Picture the world 300 years ago. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, gold. These were not just products, they were currencies of control. And behind each coin, each sweet taste, each polished surface, there were backs bent under sun, flesh torn by whips and souls caged by laws. Every plantation was a small empire, every master a god, and every enslaved person lived beneath a sky that refused to answer. Imagine waking up before dawn to a bell that doesn't ask, it commands. Imagine walking through rows of cane so tall it hides the horizon. Imagine your hands blistered and bleeding before the sun even rises. Now imagine doing it not for a day, not for a year, but for generations. Watching your children grow under the same whip that once scarred your own back. This was not life. This was repetition, a system designed to erase hope before it could take root. But hope is stubborn, and even in the fields of despair, it found ways to grow. At night, when the overseer's boots faded into the distance, whispers began. Whispers of Africa, of ancestors who had fought with spears and fire, of kings and queens who had never bowed. These stories passed from mouth to mouth, hidden inside songs, prayers, and drumming rhythms that seemed innocent. But each beat carried a secret message. Remember who you are. That was how rebellion was born, not in a moment of rage, but in a moment of remembrance. And when that memory grew strong enough, when the silence became unbearable, when pain and dignity collided, someone finally stood up. Someone lit a torch. And history, that arrogant thing written by the victors, trembled, because before we dive into the fires, you must understand the world that made them necessary. The Atlantic slave system was the largest forced migration in human history. Millions stolen, millions killed, and yet those who survived built entire continents while being denied humanity in return. In Brazil, on the plantations of Bahia and Pernambuco, in Jamaica, in Haiti, in Suriname, in South Carolina, the same rhythm pulsed through the air. It was the sound of people who refused to die quietly. Rebellion didn't begin with guns. It began with gestures, a machete hidden beneath sugarcane, a stolen horse, a secret meeting at night disguised as prayer. The enslaved learned to fight with what they had: fire, steel, courage, and faith. They were watched, beaten, chained, but chains can only hold flesh, not spirit. And the spirit was beginning to rise. Now imagine this, a night heavy with heat and silence, the moon hidden behind clouds. A man moves through the fields, slow, careful, barefoot. He carries no sword, no gun, just a torch wrapped in cloth soaked with oil. He stops, kneels, and whispers a single word in his native tongue, a word that once meant freedom. Then he lights the torch. The flame rises and the fire spreads, not just across the fields, but across history, because that one act, that one spark, was a message to the world. We are not property. We are not silent. We are not done. Think about what that meant. To fight, knowing the cost. To rebel, knowing that failure meant death, not just for you, but for your family, your children, everyone you loved. That is not madness. That is clarity. That is the kind of courage the world rarely remembers. And that is where our journey begins, with courage that defied an empire. From Haiti to Bahia, from Jamaica to Louisiana, enslaved men and women rose again and again, burning fields, toppling plantations, and forcing the world to confront the truth it had buried beneath sugar and gold. Some of these revolts succeeded. Most were crushed, but all of them mattered, because each one left a scar, a crack in the illusion of control. Empires fall not when they are conquered, but when they are remembered for their cruelty. And these rebellions, these flames of freedom, ensure that forgetting was no longer possible. Take another breath, in and out, because what comes next is the moment when whispers turn to war, when fire spoke louder than chains. Take a breath with me, in and out. Now the night explodes. The first plantation burns before dawn. Flames roar against the black sky, devouring Cain and Wood alike. Smoke billows like ghosts rising, carrying screams and hymns mixed together. From the distance, bells ring, not for prayer, but for alarm. Dogs bark, drums answer, and chaos becomes the language of the enslaved. For the first time, those who had no names became the voice of the earth. Those who had been chained rose like storms. Picture this, a line of men and women moving through the fields, their faces illuminated by torches. Machetes glint in the firelight, tools turned into weapons. Their footsteps are heavy but certain. Their breaths come in rhythm, and that rhythm is older than the plantations themselves. They do not fight for revenge. They fight for existence. Listen, can you hear the rhythm? The drumming of hearts faster than fear. The whispers of ancestors calling through time. Now, it begins everywhere and nowhere at once. Bahia, Jamaica, Saint-Domingue, Louisiana, the same cry rises. No more masters, no more chains. In the hills of Haiti, enslaved men gather under moonlight. They lift their hands to the sky, blood and sweat glistening on their skin. A priestess pours rum on the ground, an offering to the spirits of rebellion. Then lightning cracks across the clouds, and the torches are lit. That was the night of Bois Cayman, the night when enslaved swore an oath that the world could never erase. Fire spread fast in fear. Plantations fell one by one. Masters fled. Armies marched. And for the first time in centuries, the enslaved stood not as victims, but as warriors. Imagine that moment, to stand armed with nothing but courage, to face soldiers trained and armed by empires, to fight not for glory or power, but for the right to breathe as human beings. The sound of rebellion was not just fire, it was metal meeting metal, the clash of steel forged by desperation and hope. It was the sound of mothers shouting their children's names as they ran. It was the sound of old men lifting weapons one last time. It was the sound of life refusing to kneel. In Bahia, the male rebels marched with Qurans tucked into their clothes. Believing God walked beside them, they fought through the streets with machetes. Their voices chanting prayers turned into war cries. In Jamaica, Maroons ambushed British troops in forests so thick with mist that even the sun dared not enter. They fought like ghosts, disappearing into trees, returning with arrows that flew like whispers of revenge. In Louisiana, the German coast uprising shook the empire's heart. Hundreds of enslaved men and women stormed plantations, their leaders shouting, "We fight for liberty." Their march was disciplined, their courage unbreakable. For 3 days, fire ruled where fear once lived. But every rebellion comes with a price. The empires woke with fury. They sent soldiers, mercenaries, executioners. They came with muskets and cannons. But the enslaved fought with something stronger, faith. Faith that even if they fell, the idea of freedom would not. Because this is not just about war, it's about will. A man named Jean-Jacques Dessalines once said, "I have avenged America." He stood barefoot, blade stained with blood, watching the French army retreat. Behind him, Haiti burned, but it burned free. It became the first black republic in history, born from the fire of rebellion. But Haiti was not alone. Its victory sent tremors across the world. Every colony shook. Every master whispered, "What if they rise too?" And rise they did. In Brazil, in Cuba, in Trinidad, in the plantations of the Carolinas, and the fields of Virginia, the echoes of Haiti carried like thunder over oceans. Songs turned to signals. Tools became weapons. Whispers became plans. And the fear that once kept the enslaved silent became the master's curse. Now imagine this scene. A mother hiding her child in the forest before joining the fight. A father teaching his son how to run if he falls. An elder blessing the young with words of fire. If I die tonight, remember, we were never slaves in our souls. Every rebellion was a symphony of courage. Each flame that rose was a word in the same story. A story that no empire could silence. Take a breath, in and out, because here comes a moment where victory meets vengeance. The rebellion rages through the night. By dawn, smoke covers the sky. Soldiers march in lines, muskets ready. They expect submission. But what they find instead are eyes burning brighter than their torches. The enslaved no longer kneel. They no longer whisper. They shout. They charge. And though the empires have guns, the enslaved have something the empire never will. Nothing left to lose. They move as one body, one heartbeat, striking like thunder. Some fall, some rise again. But even in death, they do not beg. And in that defiance, they win something greater than freedom. They win memory. Because memory, once born, can never be chained again. Pause here and let that sink in. Fire can be extinguished. Bodies can fall. But memory lives in soil, in songs, in the silence between heartbeats. And the soil was listening. So when the last torch burned out, when the last scream faded into ash, the earth itself remembered. It held the footsteps of those who refused to die forgotten. And centuries later, we can still hear them if we listen. Take a breath with me. In and out, the fire is dying. Smoke hangs over fields like a shroud. The sky is black with ash, and the air tastes of metal and grief. The rebellion, fierce, impossible, beautiful, begins to fade, and the empire strikes back. Imagine this moment. Boots on scorched earth. Soldiers moving like shadows through the ruins of freedom. They find no kings, no castles, only bodies, burned tools, the smell of smoke and courage. And yet, even in death, the empire trembles. Because what they feared most wasn't the fire itself. It was the idea that someone dared to light it. Close your eyes. Can you hear the silence after the screams? That silence is heavy, not peace, but punishment. The soldiers march the survivors back in chains. Men and women who had stood as warriors are forced once again to their knees. Some are executed publicly, their bodies displayed as warnings, their names stripped away before the crowd. Others are sold far from their homes, scattered so they can never rise together again. Families broken, villages erased, entire generations swallowed by fear. The message is clear: you fought. Now you will forget. But history has a flaw the empire never understood. You can silence mouths, but not memory. In the burned fields, ashes settle into the soil, and that soil holds a story. Every step, every drop of blood, every unmarked grave, they become the script of a history the victors tried to erase. Imagine a mother whispering to her child at night, softly, secretly, "They fought for us." Don't let them tell you it never happened. That whisper, that's how rebellion survives. Not in books, but in blood. Not in palaces, but in hearts that refuse to forget. Across the colonies, the pattern repeats. After every rebellion, there is silence. Records destroyed. Letters burned. Priests preach obedience from pulpits. Governors write reports calling the uprising madness, disorder, uncivilized chaos. They say, the empire has restored peace. But what they really restored was fear, a fragile peace built on silence. Because silence, when forced, is not absence of sound. It's the echo of pain too dangerous to speak aloud. Imagine those who survived, working again in the same fields they had once burned. Their hands blistered by the same cane. Their backs bent beneath the same sun. But something inside them had changed. On the surface, submission. Underneath, defiance, quiet, invisible, alive. A woman hums a song as she works. It sounds like a lullaby, but hidden inside it are the names of those who fell. Each note a monument the empire cannot destroy. An old man, beaten and scarred, touches the soil and murmurs, "This earth remembers." And it does. Centuries later, archaeologists uncover bones buried beneath the cities. Bones that tell the stories the archives erased. Each fracture, each mark speaks. We were here. We fought. We lived. Let that sink in. The empire thought it had erased them, but history has its own heartbeat, and even silence is memory. In Haiti, their victory survived. In Brazil, it was buried beneath sugar and smoke. In Jamaica, rebellion flared again and again, each one crushed, each one remembered. And in the American South, the fear of revolt shaped entire laws, entire economies, entire ideologies. The empire may have won the battle, but the enslaved changed the rules of history. Every act of defiance, every uprising, every fire, it cracked the foundations of the system. It forced the world to see what it tried to hide. It forced history to blink. Imagine you are a soldier standing on the ruins of a plantation, looking at what's left, ashes, chains, silence. And for a brief moment, you wonder, what if they were right? What if freedom was not madness, but truth? What if the ones we called slaves were the only ones truly awake? The question lingers. It lingers for centuries, because rebellion never really ends. It hides in memory. It waits for the right moment. And when it returns, it doesn't come as fire. It comes as remembrance. Every time someone says their names aloud, every time a monument rises from the soil, every time a story is told that once was buried, the rebellion begins again. Inhale, exhale, the fire may have died, but the embers never stop glowing. And those embers, they're in you now. They burn quietly behind the ribs of anyone who dares to remember, because to remember is to resist. Take a deep breath with me. In and out, we've walked through fire. We've heard the clash of steel. We've seen chains melt in the heat of rebellion. And now, as the smoke clears, something remains. Something the empire could never kill: memory. Look at where we stand now. Beneath our cities, beneath our monuments and streets, beneath the noise of modern life, there are bones, there are stories, there are names that were never written, voices that were never recorded, lives that refuse to die in silence. This isn't just history, it's inheritance. Every scar on this earth carries a whisper. We fought, we burned, we lived, we became the fire. Think about it. Every time a story like this is told, the chains rattle again, but not in submission. They rattle because memory refuses to stay buried. History tried to paint rebellion as madness. But what is madness, really? Is it the courage to stand when the world demands you kneel? Is it the scream that refuses to die in the throat? If so, then madness was freedom's first language. Let your heart slow. Let the silence between words breathe. Because this isn't just a story about the enslaved. It's a story about all of us. About what we do when faced with our own chains, the invisible ones, made not of iron but of ignorance, comfort, and fear. Close your eyes for a second. Picture the faces of those who fought. Not generals, not kings, but the ones history forgot to name. A mother clutching her child as flames rise. A man lifting a torch even as soldiers close in. A boy running barefoot through cane fields, carrying a single spark that would ignite a future he'll never see. They didn't fight for glory. They fought for breath, for the right to exist without permission. And that fight, that pulse, still echoes beneath our skin. Because freedom is never inherited. It's earned again and again by those who remember. Breathe. Ask yourself, if they burn for freedom, what will you do with their memory? Will you let it fade into another forgotten story? Or will you carry it as fire, as truth, as warning? The empires are gone, but their shadows remain. They linger in inequality, in silence, in the rewriting of history. But shadows only exist where there is light. And we are the light. To tell their story is not to reopen old wounds. It is to reveal that the wound never healed because it was never seen. To name what was buried is not to disturb peace. It is to create it. Listen, can you hear it? The faint crackle of a torch in the distance. The rhythm of footsteps on soil that remembers. The heartbeat of rebellion, steady, unbroken. That sound belongs to them. But it also belongs to you. Because as long as memory survives, as long as stories like this are spoken aloud, no empire truly wins. The enslaved who rose with fire and steel did not vanish into smoke. They became the smoke, a living reminder that silence can never bury truth. They became the fire that burns through centuries, that lives in art and rhythm, in the very soil of this world. And now you've heard them, you've felt them, and once you've heard their story, you can't unhear it. So here's the truth. The rebellion never ended. It simply changed form. Now it lives in remembrance, in every word, every voice, every act of defiance that refuses to forget. Take one last breath with me. In and out, look into the darkness of history. You'll see flickers of light, tiny flames carried by those who came before. They are not gone. They are waiting for us to carry the fire forward. So when you close this video, don't let the story end here. Tell it, share it, speak their names. Because silence was the master's weapon. And memory is ours. When fire spoke louder than chains. This is not just a story. It's a mirror. It's a promise. It's a call. Subscribe to the Broken Chains channel for more stories of rebellion, resistance, and truth buried beneath time. And tell me, what do you think of this hidden history? Leave your comment below, because the fire that burned for freedom still burns in those who remember